Wonderful. So I'm Godwin Okri, CEO Menvo Asset Group. We are a real property investment consultant, developers, and strategists. We have offices in central London, Lagos, New York, and in South Africa. Today, I want to talk to you about real estate, given the current climate that we're in. This COVID-induced recession has made the need to ask the question, how would all the different asset class subsist in this economic climate? Today, I'm going to present compelling argument why I think the real estate is in fact a vaccine against the virus of recession. I think one needs to break this presentation into four parts. Firstly, we're going to look at the economic landscapes of real estate. We will then look at how real estate has responded to inflation. And then, of course, we'll look at the question, can real estate be a vaccine against a recession? And finally, we'll look at the lifeblood to ensure that this strategy works. So it's in four parts. So let me just quickly deal with the first part of real estate. Remember that real estate is the oldest asset class there is. Earth, the ground that you step on, is 4 billion years old. So real estate is 4 billion years old. So it's the oldest asset class than stocks and shares, derivatives, debentures, gold, and all the rest of it. It's the oldest asset class. So it's no wonder that everybody is trying to enter this market that we're talking about. Today's question is, can real estate act as a vaccine against a recession? That's the question. So let's just quickly look at the economic landscape. So let me just bear with me. The residential real estate space. Just very quickly, if you look at in the UK, the total value of real estate in the UK is 6.8 trillion pounds. That's about the size of the Japanese economy. In Nigeria, the total value of residential real estate is 4.7 trillion naira. So you can see the size of the market that we're talking about. Here in the UK, 2 million, there are 2 million people employed in the buy-to-let market, and their total asset is about 2 trillion pounds. You can imagine the quantum of this market in its scope. Now, let's just look very quickly at the global economy. In terms of global sentiment, property price has risen by 11% in America, 22% in New Zealand, and 5% across 25 countries around the world. In spite of a COVID-induced recession, property price is actually rising. How is that the case? It's because if you look at, very quickly, we need to look at the inflation base. In other words, how real estate has responded to inflation. And that would explain to you why prices are rising in spite of COVID. Think about it. COVID has come in, it's created a recession, very similar to the 2007 financial crisis. Not as bad, but almost close to it. And in spite of that, the real estate market is fighting its way through. And all you have to look at very quickly is the asset-based inflation link. Now, if we look at the demand and supply indicators, that will give you where we are in terms of inflation. In the UK, we need about 300,000 homes annually. So people need homes, 300,000 homes are needed annually, and we're only building 150,000 homes. So in other words, in real economic terms, we are building 50% of base. So we're building 50% of what we need. And if you look at the record from the Office of National Statistics, which is a government body that spill out all the statistics that all academics and intellectuals and developers make reference to, they say that 423,000 planning permission is granted annually, but developers are not actually developing. So they get planning permission from the government and they sell this planning permission. They sell the land in its planning permission stage and they're not actually developing. And that's why we're not building near enough houses that we need, which is causing an asset inflation. Just coming to Nigeria. The National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria say that we need about 17 million homes. We have a shortage of 17 million homes, and we need about $360 billion to bridge the gap. About 35% of homeowners live in Nigeria. So 65% of Nigerians do not have a home of their own. So you could see demand chasing supply. And if we look at the graph, you will see that demand is putting pressure on the stock of housing. And because there's a fixed stock of housing and more people are looking for a place to buy or stay, that puts pressure on the housing stock and cause price to increase. And that's why property price in America has increased by 11%, in New Zealand by 22%, and in the rest of the world at 5%. It is no wonder, because a lot of people are chasing too few land, and that put pressure on price. So now, this now brings me back to why we are here today. How can you say that real estate can act as a vaccine against a recession? In what way can real estate be a vaccine? I think we need to define what a vaccine is, don't we? Now, remember this. A vaccine is a biological preparation of a chemical system to create an immunity against a specific indices of disease. So it is an immunity against a specific disease. So that's what a vaccine is. Now, what is recession? Now, economists has come up with different definition of recession. A recession is a 2 quarterly contraction of GDP. So if you have the gross domestic product contract consecutively in each quarter, you've got a recession in your hands. In other words, there'll be high unemployment, the public spending will drop, consumer confidence index will swing into negative, and as John Maynard Keynes would say in his Keynesian economics, we're in contraction and we're in practically slowdown. So that's what a recession is. A recession is an economic slowdown. It's the worst condition you could be in. All right. So how then can you say that real estate can act as a vaccine in a contracting GDP economy? That's like an oxymoron. It's like a contradiction in terms. How can you say that? I've got the answer. It is possible for real estate to act as a vaccine, as an immunity against the virus of recession. And the answer to that is comparative strategic investment. So if you're a property developer, a land speculator, a realtor, in every spectrum of the real estate market, you need to consider comparative strategic investment. And I'm going to explain to you what a comparative strategic investment is. Let me tell you the story of the Diamond Man. I think that would answer the question of a strategic comparative investment. Now, the Diamond Man is this young man who lives in a village. I think one day he got very bored and thought, there's not much happening here in this village. So I'm going to build a boat, put my boat on the Pacific Ocean, and set sail to land unknown to find good living. So that's what he did. He built a boat, put the boat on the Pacific Ocean, and off he went. Of course, he was shipwrecked. And then he found himself in this unknown island. So when he got to this island, he got to the shore of this island and saw a lot of diamonds. He saw a lot of diamonds on the shore of this island. So he said to himself, now I am a millionaire because I've got this diamond. So he gathered all this diamond, and then went to the village of that island in which he found himself and attempted to buy things with the diamond. So the people in this island looked at him and said, what are you doing with this diamond? We don't need diamonds. We have diamonds everywhere. We even have diamonds in our shores and in our beaches. We don't need diamond. What we need is oranges. We don't need diamond. We need oranges. So this man thought, oranges? I'm a farmer in my village. No problem. So he gathered all the diamond in this island, put it on another boat, and shipped the diamond to his own village. Then went to his village, used a small diamond to buy a lot of oranges. And guess what? He shipped these oranges to the island and was making millions. So he would sell oranges in this island and sell diamond in his own village. That, my friend, is comparative strategic investment. That answers a recession. Because if there's a recession in this man's village, all he would do is sail to this island, get diamonds, and come back to where this recession is, and use diamond as a vaccine against the recession that is damaging his village. So comparative strategic investment is an emulation of real estate as a vaccine against recession. So question, can real estate act as a vaccine against a recession? The answer is a resounding yes. Ask the diamond man. The diamond man will say to you, the comparative strategic investment was what saved my life. It dealt with the recession. Let's now break down diamond man's concept. So the comparative strategic investment has two parts. And this is how the diamond man benefited from it. So it's got two parts. The first part is called the principle of inverse benefit. So comparative strategic investment has two parts. Remember, you're a property investor, you're a developer, you have to understand this concept of comparative strategic investment. So if you're investing in one country, if there's a recession, the principle of inverse benefit says you could use this as a mechanism, as a vaccine to deal with that recession. So question, what is the principle of inverse benefit? I will tell you, and the diamond man has already answered this question. The principle of inverse benefit says that if you want to be an intelligent investor, you must try and invest in two or more countries. You must invest in two or more countries with two different currency. So if the currency of one country is overvalued against the currency of the other, you sell your investment in the strong currency, you go to the weak currency and buy more investment because you're going into a weak economy, and so you're buying more. So the principle of inverse benefit is saying countries are inversely beneficial to one another because as one goes up, one goes down. And as one goes up, the other goes down. So if you're in the place that goes up, you sell your investment in the country where it's on the up, you go to the country where it's cheaper on the down and buy more investment. That's called comparative strategic investment. Remember the diamond man. That's exactly what he did. So one strand of inverse benefit is a vaccine against recession. Remember, a vaccine is an immunity. It's an embodiment against a microbes. How does it deal with microbes? So how does real estate deal with the microbes and the facetiousness of recession? It's being able to manipulate this conflicting position and finding an answer. Inverse benefit is the answer, is a strand to the vaccine. Remember in the world of biology, we have two vaccines. We have AstraZeneca from Oxford, and of course, we've got Pfizer. So there are two schools of vaccine. AstraZeneca says, we could solve your problem, but you might have blood clot if you take it. Pfizer says, we'll solve your problem, but the vaccine will last for 3 months. After that, you're on your own. But it's still a vaccine, isn't it? So that's what we are. But the real estate market is saying our kind of vaccine is a vaccine for life. It's not AstraZeneca, nor is it Pfizer. It's the Godwin Okri concept of the principle of inverse benefit, which I borrowed from the diamond man. Let me just talk about the FDI, the foreign direct investment. Now, foreign direct investment are monies that is coming in from a foreign country into the domestic country. China has the highest FDI in the world. So people are using the diamond man philosophy. They're saying, oh, China's economy is great. So I'm going to move my money in Naira or in dollars or in pounds or in euro. And I'm going to invest it in China. And so the total inverse benefit FDI money is coming into China is 163 billion, the biggest than America, and of course, than in New Zealand. Remember that the central bank in New Zealand are redefining this scope, and they're trying to see how they could increase the FDI. But China's central bank has managed to answer that question. The Federal Reserve are still sitting in their sitting room trying to suss out how to deal with this, but China is well ahead of everybody else. In Africa, Egypt has the biggest FDI at 5.5 billion, and of course Nigeria is 2.6 billion. So the inverse benefit philosophy is actually working. All you have to do is look at the records on FDI. So that deals with comparative investment strategy. Let me just quickly, before I go on to the second limb, I'll just talk a little bit about exchange trade funds, the ETF. Now, exchange trade funds are funds that you buy and sell on the stock market. Now, how that works is some people, say if you live in Nigeria, you could say, I want to hold pounds and trade on the stock market with the underlying specific asset, such as stocks and shares. So if the English economy is performing well, you come out, you buy dollars or you buy pounds, right? And then you trade with that. So the exchange trading fund is exactly that. And you could trade on the FTSE 100 or SP 500 in the US. And you could trade, and of course you could trade using this on real estate investment trust, which I will come to later on. So ETF is an extension of the inverse benefit philosophy that we're looking at. So now let's now turn to the second part of the comparative strategic investment that the diamond man used. Remember, we're still talking about how real estate could be a vaccine against a recession. And so the second strand, so if you're not going to use the principle of inverse benefit, you could use the quantum property investment. Now, quantum investment draws the strand from Einstein's concept of E equals mc squared, the scientific base. Now, remember Einstein. Einstein says E equals mc squared. In other words, energy equals mass plus velocity. The speed of velocity gives you energy. So how does that answer the question on vaccine? If you're a real estate practitioner, you need to consider quantum property investment. And to understand it, I've got a formula called E equals mxv. And that's my vaccine to deal with recession. Quantum property says you should buy properties very cheap and they'll sell them high. I think I learned from my daughter the blue ocean strategy. I think that would fall into that, wouldn't it? So you buy very cheaply, you transform your property so that it's different from other properties on that prevailing market space, and then sell it for a profit. So you could be able to do that in spite of the economic condition of the time. So how can you do it? You could use the concept E equals mxv. E stands for energy. So the energy, which is the profit you make in your property, equals M, which is mass, which is this below market value property. X stands for the number of properties that you buy, and V stands for velocity. So in science, velocity means speed, the speed of something. So your profit means the buying properties below market value, buying a lot of properties below market value at speed, and you could recycle capital. So if you have a recession, so let's say you have a recession and you're buying properties cheaply, you do those properties up, and then you sell them below the prevailing market price. If you're selling below market price, you're going to have buyers, and the speed at which you do that gives you your profit. And so you're making profit in spite of recession. And it is no wonder that if you look at the records from the Office of National Statistics in the UK, or the Bureau of National Statistics in Nigeria, or of course from the Federal Reserve in America, you will see that real estate is actually going up in spite of the recession. 11% in America, 22% in New Zealand, and 5% across the board of 25 countries. How is that possible in a COVID-infused recession? It's because there are a lot of people who are using strategies as a vaccine. So that pretty much answers the question, can real estate act as a vaccine? I've answered the question. The answer is a resounding yes. Now let's now look at the lifeblood. What is the lifeblood of this strategy? How is it possible that this could take place? The driver of this strategy is one question, is one answer: money. If you have money, you could move mountains. If you have money, you could invest in a recession and you will make more money. He that has, even more will be given. That's how it is in economics, as it is in religion. So how do you raise these funds as a driver to this investment strategy? I'll tell you. The first one is IPO. For those economic students, IPO is initial public offering. So if you're for first-time companies, you could issue stocks and shares and float it on the stock market and raise capital. So IPO is one way in which you could generate funds very quickly and surf the market in spite of recession. SPV, special purpose vehicle. These are private companies established primarily just to buy properties. So you could create an SPV and then sell shares privately to family and friends. So you could create your own company, sell shares to family and friends. As you sell shares, you're making money. So people are buying shares into your company, and you use that shares to invest in your music, in investment, in real estate, and whatever that is. That is the way to raise funds. I've got more. I have more. You could do IPO. If it's an existing company, you use IPO. If it's a new company, you use SPV, selling stocks and shares privately. Thirdly, you could use invoice factoring. Now, what is invoice factoring? Invoice factoring is selling your account receivables. I'll explain. Now, if you are a company and you sell a product and you give out an invoice, but your client has not paid you, that invoice that your client has that invoice that you've raised is money. So you take that invoice to a factor, to a bank. So you give that invoice to a bank in return for cash. That's called invoice factoring. Lloyd's Bank is doing it, Barclays Bank, HSBC in Nigeria, the First Bank of Nigeria, in America, in South Africa, Absa Bank is doing it. In America, Bank of America is doing it. And of course, Australia, New Zealand. It's a prevalent thing in real estate. So the question, how do you raise funds? IPOs, SPVs, invoice factoring. I've got more. You can use overage. And again, overage is in my book, it's a new concept. Now, the concept of overage is that if you want to buy property, look for a seller who is selling properties below market value. So you tell the seller, I will buy your property below market value. You'll be my partner. And then when I improve the property and sell it, we both share the profit. It's called overage. So you buy a property. So let's say in a street, the prevailing property price is 100,000. You could go to the buyer and say, I know the prevailing price is 100,000. Let me buy it for 20,000 pounds. I will build up the property. And then when I come to sell, we could then share the profits. So by buying properties below market value, the savings that you've made is funds that you've infused in your investment. So there is no question about, I don't have money. How do I invest in properties? There are strategies to raise funds. You just need to know it. I've got more. Real Estate Investment Trust, REIT. What is a REIT? A real estate investment trust is a vehicle that tells the whole world that even if you have £1, you can still buy property. And the only way you could do that is through the vehicle called the Real Estate Investment Trust. It's almost like a unit trust. It's like a CIS, which is prevalent even in Nigeria, New York. And some are traded in the New York SP 500, FTSE 100 in England. You could trade all of that. So you could trade on REIT. You could buy shares as low as £1 on the REIT investment, and you could own property in central London. Shopping malls of 2.3 billion, 5 billion. You're a shareholder in that arrangement, and the vehicle that allows you to enter that is the Real Estate Investment Trust. Let me tell you a bit about the law. You could either enter as a real estate as an investor, or you yourself could create a REIT. How do you create a REIT? You could form a company, call it a REIT, register it on the stock market, and then sell stocks and shares and raise funds to invest in office space, retail space, or in the residential space. So that's another option open for investors as a lifeblood for investment, even in a recession. Remember, is real estate a vaccine? The answer is yes, because the lifeblood for it is there for you to take to protect you against this sudden economic movement called a recession. Let me now turn to innovation as another way of raising funds in this recession-based positioning. Now, what is novation? Now, novation is a debt repayment obligation. So how that works is, if you know someone who has a mortgage and the mortgage is about to be repossessed, so the land's about to be repossessed, you could go to the owner of that mortgage and say, let me take over your mortgage. I'll take over the debt and you step out of the mortgage and I become the owner of that property. That is known as novation. So you novate means you step into the shoes of the borrower. Now, this is what one needs to know. With novation, you are buying properties with no monies down. You're owning property without putting any penny in this investment because you're stepping into the shoes of an existing borrower and you're taking over the proprietary benefit of that property. During the 2007 financial crisis, novation was very prevalent. A lot of retail space were novated off. A lot of office space were novated off, and a lot of residential properties had novation applications applied to it. So novation is real and is a driver to this strategy of comparative investment. So that's another weapon in your armory. Joint venture is a common one, and I'm just going to skip on that because of time. Mortgages, again, is another one. Mortgages is very common. I could break it down into UK and in Nigeria. In the UK, if you're a buy-to-let investor, you could get a mortgage. The ICR is 145%. And the hypothetical interest is 5.5%. So if you're a buy-to-let investor, you could get a mortgage even if you're overseas. So even if you're in Nigeria, you could get a British mortgage to buy British properties, provided the ICR is 145% or higher. You could get a mortgage, absolutely. For first-time buyers, of course, that rule doesn't apply. First-time buyers, your income should be 4.5 times. The property price mustn't be more than 4.5 times your income. So if the purchase price of the property is less than 4.5 times your income, you will get a mortgage. Absolutely right. You will get a mortgage as a first-time buyer. That's in the UK. In Nigeria, mortgages are available, but remember that in Nigeria, mortgage is about 0.5% of GDP. So it's about £3 billion to date. So the total mortgages to date is about 3 billion, very small. In South Africa, it's about 77 billion. The mortgage is about 77 billion, which is about 22% of GDP. And in America, 10 trillion pounds of mortgage monies are swirling around that economy. And it's about 61% of GDP. So mortgages is another way to raise funds in buying real estate. Just very quickly, in Nigeria, if you're a first-time buyer, you could, of course, apply to the National Housing Funds for a mortgage, and the NHF will give you a mortgage of about a maximum of 15 million, no more than 15 million. I don't know what 15 million can buy, but if you have 15 million from the NHF, you could practically invest in below market value properties, maybe slightly outside Lagos, because average property price in Lagos is about 35 million. So you could see that 15 million will get you absolutely nowhere. But outside Lagos, maybe. So that's for first-time buyers. For buy-to-let investors in Nigeria, of course, you could apply for a commercial mortgage. I know FCMB, CMB, the Commercial Mortgage Bank, the FCMB, Fidelity Bank, they all have this diaspora mortgage where those in the diaspora could, as it were, get a mortgage and buy in Nigeria. And vice versa. If you're in Nigeria, you could get a mortgage from this bank and buy in the UK. So if you have any question on that, you can always come back to me, and Menvo Limited, we could facilitate that for you. So if you're a buy-to-let investor, then you would need a commercial mortgage. If you're a first-time buyer, you would need the loan from the NHF. But for buy-to-let investors, most certainly commercial banks, Zenith Bank and all the rest of it. So that pretty much deals with the lifeblood of real estate. So in summary, because of time, I had to rush this because we only have 35 minutes. You could see that real estate and in fact is a vaccine against the virus of a a recession. So let me just quickly, because of time, deal with some general points very quickly, and then I will pause and take questions. Where should you be buying? I think where you should be buying. For student accommodation, Manchester is a great place because the yield in Manchester is 12%. For residential space, the Lekki corridor in Lagos is a good one. Melbourne, Australia is a good one for residential space. Dallas, Texas. Orlando, Florida for tourists. So those are good yield places to invest in property. So damn right, a good one. The next question: which sector is stronger? The retail space is competing with Amazon. So remember, we're looking at which retail sector is stronger. If we look at the retail space is competing with Amazon at the moment. Online is making retail a bit tricky. If we look at office space, because of Corona, people are working from home. So there's vacancy. There's some vacancy there. And so one needs to consider that when looking at office. But most certainly for me, the strongest sector for me will be the residential sector. Because people need a place to stay. We've seen the numbers already in America, in New Zealand, and in 25 other countries. So residential sector for me, most certainly. Next question: is now the time to buy? Answer is a resounding yes, because at the moment in the Bank of England, base rate is pretty much 0.05, very, very low, and interest rate is low. Transaction cost is low. Stamp duty is, you don't pay stamp duty up to value of £500,000. So if you're buying property below 5,000, you're exempt from stamp duty. So transaction cost is very low. So real estate right now is very popular in the UK, in the US, and in other parts. In Nigeria, the jury is out on that at the moment. But with comparative investment, invest where the record speaks. That's the concept. So with comparative investment, most certainly UK, US, and Australia would be my bet. So where do I see the future? What's the prognosis in terms of the future of real estate? Well, I think we're going to have a steep yield curve, considering the Phillips curve for you economic students. So I think we're going to have a steep yield curve. We will have asset inflation, definitely. And I think we're going to have an overvalued sterling and an undervalued naira. So for you comparative investment strategists, there you are, where you have a strong sterling and a very weak naira. You sell in the strong currency and you buy in the weak currency countries. So that's pretty much it.
Brought to you by Menvo Homes Limited.
The Okri Property Show.